Welcome to the Contagious Code Podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I am Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today on the podcast, my guests are the team behind Kendo React, specifically Sam Basu, Kathryn Grayson Nanz, and Kiril Peyansky. This team has put an enormous amount of care into Kendo React and Kendo UI, a phenomenal design system and component library for your applications. In our discussion today, we talk about what it takes to build something like Kendo React and Kendo UI, because they just launched a free tier. This used to be a commercial offering where you get components, sophisticated components that work with a variety of UI, this user interface libraries like React, Angular, jQuery, whatever you want. And the companies pay for this, developers pay for this, but now there's a free tier. And so in our discussion, we talk about what is this? What is Kendo UI? What is Kendo React? Why do people use it? How do you build it? And the answer is so enlightening because a lot of work goes into creating a high quality set of user interface components. For example, consider a dropdown, right? It's like a select with a list. When you click on it, what do you expect? Should it be filterable? Should it load its options from somewhere else on the internet? There's a lot of decisions that go into this, and frankly, it drains a lot of engineering time. And the team at Progress, the company behind Kendo UI and React, have invested hours and hours into creating what they consider, and what I consider after our discussion, a bulletproof design system and component library that they're now giving away for free. In our discussion, we talk about how do they even build something for so many different libraries? Do they just do bindings, or is it a unique library, a unique component library for each UI library like React and Angular and so on? And it turns out it's a unique offering per library. They have a React code base and an Angular code base and so on, and they have teams that maintain it. It's a massive effort. We also talk about what is a design system. What is it? And we talk about design tokens, atomic design. How does a component library both serve designers and developers? Our guest Kathryn today is the author of a book about how designers and developers can work well together, and we also allude to this and put links to that in the show notes. This episode is a deep dive on things even like technical state management, data grids. How do you do data grids, or very sophisticated data tables in React and other libraries? Well, Kendo UI has a library for that just works. And so we talk about considerations around that, like virtualization. If you have like billions and billions of rows, how do you virtualize them, making them easy to scroll and not use too much of memory in the browser, both at the row level, but also at the column level. Indeed, Kiril tells us about that. It's just a really tremendous deep dive about a very sophisticated product that is now free, and we talk about how it works and where it's going. This team ships, and this team cares. They care a lot about making developers productive with their components. And so with that, we're about to start the episode soon, but this is very much separate to my day job and runs on partnerships and sponsors. So let's take a moment to acknowledge the sponsor of this podcast, and then we can go from there. The Contagious Code Podcast is sponsored by Code Crafters. Code Crafters is a great way to level up your coding skills. How it works is you pick a tool like Redis or Docker or Git, some developer tool, and you pick a programming language like Ruby or Elixir or Rust, and they will have you build the tool like Git in the language you choose, like Rust, from scratch. They will hold your hand along the way, making sure that you build a production-grade application like Redis or Docker from scratch. And by doing this, you get better at the tool because you understand more of its internals and how it works. You also get better at the language because you build the tool in the language. It's a great 2-for-1. They have a generous free tier, but if you want to start paying, you can get a massive discount using the link in the show notes. That's tej.as/codecrafters. This discussion is an exciting one, and I hope you listen attentively and enjoy it as much as I have. Here's my discussion with the team behind Kendo React. Sam, Kathryn, Kiri, welcome to the Contagious Code Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Okay.
I'm so excited to get into this chat and talk about Kendo React and Kendo UI, design systems, UI libraries, and all of it. Just to kick us off, let's maybe start right at the beginning. This looks like a product from Progress. For listeners unfamiliar with Kendo UI and Progress, how would you describe it? What is Kendo UI, and what is the broader context it's in?
I can go. All right. So maybe as a quick round of intros, and Kathryn and Kiril can introduce themselves when they speak. But I'm Sam Basu. I'm an old man. I've been doing this for a while. I come from, Microsoft background a little bit, but, I do a little bit of everything these days. But Progress, we are, we have a big portfolio of products. We do a lot of different things for developer audiences, testing audiences, design systems, infrastructure management, and data management. But the core of where all three of us belong is what we call developer tooling. So we are trying to make developers a little bit more productive. A lot of it is UI components, testing solutions, design solutions, network debugging solutions. But when you talk about the UI, we realize that developers have a lot of choice. So you build your apps today that are very demanding based on whichever stack you choose. If you do choose, JavaScript, then we have a lot of offerings for you. That's mostly our Kendo UI family of products. We have essentially written, UI components and, supporting libraries and frameworks for Angular, for React, for Vue, for jQuery. jQuery is kind of where it all started, 10, 15 years back. And we do a lot of .NET as well. So in the bigger portfolio of all our things, Kendo UI is a beloved product suite for all of our JavaScript developers in the house.
Fantastic. This is maybe a meta question, we're getting too soon, but given that Kendo UI is the JavaScript focused UI library, are there, for example, like native focused UI sets of tools like for Swift UI and mobile or not yet?
Not at this time. I saw Sam jumping at the bit to talk about how he can get stuff into desktop and mobile apps, so I'll hand it right back over.
Okay, so a little bit of yes and no, because we look at the present, state of app development, and you can question what is native. For desktop, it's kind of clear, like it needs to be a native app for Windows or Mac OS. For mobile, it gets to be a little bit of a gray area. Is it native UI? Is it native, API access? Is it native performance? Or perhaps you can do away with one or two of those things if your user experience is good enough, right? So do you have to build things in Swift or, Java or Objective-C? We see most developers trying to lean towards cross-platform solutions because, again, with the same code base, you can target, three different platforms. So it's more enticing. So a lot of our UI that we build, it does turn around and render native UI on iOS, on Android, and on Windows. But those are not things that people have a big appetite for getting just by itself. So it's more of an abstraction over the cross-platform solutions.
Right. I appreciate the nuance in the answer. Thank you so much. Okay, so Kendo UI is a broad JavaScript tool of UI components, essentially. And there's bindings for each framework or library, like React and Angular, Swift. Excuse me.
I wouldn't say that's bindings, but more we built the components for each framework separately. So we are reusing some core business logic from the components, but we want to take full advantage of the framework. So when it comes with React, you want your state to be managed by React. The same goes with Angular and Vue. So we have those things that it's not native in the terms of like mobile components, but we build them from the ground up with the full capabilities of each framework. So this is a lot of work go there. So we used to have those things that we call wrappers, but we do not speak about those.
Wow. Okay, that sounds really like from an engineering perspective. This does sound. You said, Kiril, that's a lot of effort. That sounds like a lot of effort because you've got to maintain, not just build, but then maintain native components, native to the library for each library. We have some episodes with people from Sentry, and Sentry has similar application where they have like capturing tools and monitoring tools for various frameworks, and they've got internal teams to manage those. Is it similar at Progress? Like, do you all have like, this is the Kendo Angular people, this is the Kendo jQuery people? Is it just a very large organization? Because I imagine it's a lot of work, and I'm curious how you manage that.
Yeah, it's a bigger organization, and we have the React team, the Vue team, the Angular team, and obviously there's a lot of cross-team initiatives. So if we are building a specific feature, we want to see beforehand when we can extract some kind of business logic. So we try to reuse a lot of things, but we want to take full advantage of the actual framework. So there is a specific team that's working on the Angular components, specific team on the React components. So yeah.
It's kind of fun.
Incredible.
We have 3 big releases every year, and the libraries end up by the kind of end of the year all mostly in sync, but sometimes one will get a new component like one release before the other. The developer advocates are always like, oh, I can't believe you got that. Like, I got that last time. I'm glad you got it this time. Or like, oh, that looks so cool. I can't wait until we get that next release. Like, it's a fun, me and the Angular developer advocate, Alyssa Nichol, will usually go back and forth because the React and Angular ones are very close. And it's like, ooh, I can't wait till we get that one. That looks so cool.
It's almost like watching a horse race internally. You're like,
yeah,
who's going to win? Wow. How? Let's zero in a little bit on Kendo React, just as a case study on, because you've got all these different full version libraries for full version host libraries, so to speak. What specific problems does Kendo React solve in the React ecosystem? And let's maybe frame this question in the context of other React UI libraries, right? And this is not how are you different than or how are you better than. I think that's a very basic question, but I'm asking for sort of the nuance, the edge, or the difference that Kendo React offers versus something like, I don't know, Material UI, or even Shad CN's, and it's a completely different case, right? Because it's not even a library; it's more like copy and paste this code. So I'll let you speak to the developer experience and the sort of uniqueness factor of Kendo React.
Well, from the engineering perspective, the uniqueness factor definitely lays in our design system and the more complex components that we provide. So the data grid is like a common denominator between all the UI component libraries. From there on, we expand on even more complex components. So some of them would be a full-blown scheduler component, which is like it's an application on itself, but we distribute it as a component and allow you to customize it further. We have something that we call Pivot Grid, which has like early advanced functionalities, editors and things like that. They are definitely a separator from us. And Kathryn, you can probably speak a little bit more of the design side.
Yeah, see if you can stop me. But yeah, the thing I really like about us that I think is unique is that we really look at the design and all of that as kind of a holistic view, right? So a little personal history. I started off on the design side of things. That's what I went to school for. I was a graphic and web designer for many years, and I kind of meandered over into software development slowly, one job at a time. But because of that, I've kind of been on like both sides of the fence. And a lot of times these kind of tools that are mostly oriented at developers don't consider the design experience. That's a crucial part of building a full app that's going to be user-friendly, that's going to be popular, it's going to be adopted and loved and maintained, right? Is that it needs to be this kind of full picture. And our tool suite includes tools for designers as well as tools for developers, documentation for designers as well as tools for developers, and some tools that kind of bridge between the gaps, like our theme builder, where we're kind of trying to create a source of truth and eliminate that more traditional like waterfall style handoff. So Sam's jumping in.
Can I come
What'd
in
I
here?
forget?
So, yeah, no, I feel like the old dad trying to say, did you pack this for lunch? So, okay, so when we look at Kendo React, you see the obvious benefits as to what we are bringing. It's, years and years of engineering, professionally built and supported UI components that you can just throw in your apps and be productive. we have always in the developer space had this build versus buy, debate. Like, should I just build it from scratch? Nothing stopping you from building a grid, but for you to compete at a level of, engineering, building a grid for 10 years and, evolving that, it's a lot of work and you're signing up for a lot of maintenance. So there's that build versus buy debate. You have to ship apps, you have to ship your app's features. So think about what makes sense for your app and your stack. However, if you think beyond just React, what we try doing here is try to give you a sense of confidence as you are working with Kendo React. We want to be your partners in your, have you fall into a pit of success, so to speak. So essentially, the idea is to truly be your partner. So is it only just one React app that you're building? And also in that app that you're building, how are your docs? How is your support? Because invariably you're going to have questions as you build this. We want to stand by you. Also, it's unlikely that you're doing just one thing, right? Most enterprises, or even if you're an indie developer, you have a couple of different apps and you start having a family of products. So we want to come in as a partner who helps you throughout the entire journey of your application, development lifecycle. Is it testing? Is it the design story? Is it network debugging? How are you doing reporting? How are you, including document processing and PDF libraries? How are you integrating with your CMS? So everything all together is what we try to offer, and you pick and choose and you build your own stack.
Fantastic. Thank you. So it's so much more based on everything that was said than just a component library. It sounds like it's a component library with a very rich assortment of components, data grids and pivot grids and all kinds of things, with an emphasis and a focus on the design purity of them. It's not just some code that you can reuse. It's thought through with design. And a lot of it is created for the long haul, sort of like if you're a company with maybe sub-companies, a conglomerate, and you want things to be uniform and scale and be accessible. It's sort of like almost like the enterprise answer to components. Do I understand that correctly?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be coming for my job if I'm not careful. I gotta get that good at summarizing it.
That's so. Well, hey, this is just a summary of everything you've said. So, thank you. I want to. Yes, Sam, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, one of the last words you mentioned is really important: accessibility. So it's not just a nice thing to have, or it's an inclusive thing to do. It's important for your business, because if you are not accessible in your apps, you're missing out on a huge chunk of your audience, and there are regulatory needs for you to be compliant. There is American Disability Act, there is European Accessibility Act that's coming into play, not just for public sector but private sector this summer. So you just have to be accessible. This is not choice anymore, and it takes a lot of work, as Kiril will justify a lot of engineering to make sure, are we doing screen readers, are we doing tabs, are we doing all the things that makes us compliant.
Yeah, I think that's it's quite unfortunate that the first threat of you're going to be missing out on a lot of users isn't enough for companies, that now governments have to be like, you're going to miss out on a lot of money because we're going to fine you if this is not accessible. That's unfortunately the world we live in, but I'm happy about it. I'm happy that so I live in Berlin, I'm happy that we're forcing companies to be accessible by the summer of 2025. I heard, Kiril, in your message about the variety and the richness of components being the uniqueness factor, you mentioned data grid. One, I'm thrilled that there's a data grid that is also now free. That I understand this used to be a paid product and now there's a free tier. I look forward to taking full advantage of that data grid. Previously, I've had interesting experiences, some would say traumatic experiences, with data grids, and especially ones with pleasant design and accessibility, because do you use a table? Tables have limits in HTML, which I found out the hard way. Okay, then do you use a bunch of divs and maybe CSS? That also, at some point, has some very strict limits around performance. And you can, when I created a data grid with divs was when I learned that you can only have so many elements on a page before browsers will just not render any more elements. And so then the next evolution of my data grid trauma was to use a canvas. And canvas-based data grids are, I think, more common these days. I think of AG Grid, which, as far as I remember, is not canvas-based. It's a number of divs. And I think it's called Flight UI or a Glide or something. Anyway, there's an open source data grid that's canvas-based. And for canvas-based data grids, a problem that comes up often is accessibility. It's Canvas, and Canvas has some challenges with accessibility. So with all of this context, Kiril, I'm picking on you because you mentioned data grids. I'm curious, the Kendo React data grid, how is it built? How is it accessible? And then maybe Kathryn, if there's room to speak about the design of it as well. I think we can understand the whole of Kendo React by understanding parts of it. Yeah, and I think the data grid is a really great challenge to focus on.
Well, if you think of it, a data grid is basically a table underneath. So to address the elephant in the room, we are based on tables and table rows and table sales. This sacrifice a little bit on our side because it's a little bit more harder to juggle with it and implement some new things. But in the end result is optimal for the end consumer. It's optimal in terms of accessibility, and it's optimal in terms of performance. And this is how we go. So whatever it takes, we will do our best to produce the best products. So this is on the accessibility side and how is it built.
But with tables come limits. Yeah. For example, you can't really. It's harder. I don't know if it's impossible. You can correct me here, but it's likely harder to have multiple sticky columns and or rows. It's harder to virtualize because table layout is determined by the layout of each row and cell. And so if you want to virtualize, meaning like hide 1,000 until the user scrolls close enough, you'll run into problems there. I'm curious about this table-based data grid. Does it have support for those features like virtualization?
Yes, and I would love to nerd a little bit about those. So mentioning virtualization, there's a big performance story that we're trying to do the best in terms of performance. So not only row virtualization is possible, it's also column virtualization. This was a bigger challenge for us, but here comes the expertise. Like we have been building data grids for so many years now, and we cannot transfer the full code from the jQuery grid to the React grid, but we can transfer a lot of knowledge internally on how we achieve things and take full advantage of the frameworks to do this. So in terms of virtualization, we have both row virtualization and column virtualization, and the column virtualization is like a completely new thing that we have to work around with the columns to virtualize them. So this is a big one, especially.
Is Kendo React open source? No.
No, we're not.
No.
Again, we have this free tier now, but we are a closed library and we are maintained exclusively by the teams, the individual development teams that manage each one. So we have, I think we mentioned briefly earlier, React team, an Angular team, a jQuery team. Each one is dedicated to the maintenance of that specific library.
Great. But if I can npm install it, then it's kind of open source. You know what I mean? Like I could read through the source code. And the reason I'm asking is because if I was to reverse engineer, or maybe just understand the virtualization here, people who listen to this podcast like deep dives in code. And so how does the virtualization work? I guess this is my question. There's multiple strategies, right? You can just load a subset of the data and render that, or you can load all the data but hide the top selection of rows, show a middle portion, hide the bottom selection of rows, and as a user scrolls, just toggle like what you hide and show. Are we able to summarize the virtualization mechanism to achieve that? And is that something you're even allowed to do? And feel free to push back and say no here because it's not open source. But I think there's curious people who want to know, like, how do I achieve similar virtualization?
Okay, I can share a little bit about the virtualization. The row virtualization, I believe it's pretty standard nowadays. Like when we request from the user a portion of the data, and this data can all be available on the client, or we can ask the user to fetch it for us and just give us this portion that we're showing right now. So you can have all the data available and we can just show a portion of it just to overcome the limitations that you mentioned, that you cannot have more than, I believe, don't quote me on that, but the certain number of elements that you can have
It
on the
was about
page.
65,000 last time I ran into this.
It's supposed to be, yeah. So we can show just a portion of this, but then you can have only the portion that we are currently showing available on the client, like in your browser. And when the user scroll, we prepare everything in advance for you and just navigate the developer, hey, fetch us this exact portion of the data, and we can work around the loading indicators, we can work around the scroll positioning and everything, and you just fetch the data. We design it so it's as simple as that, and we take we do the complex works under the hood. And again, it really depends on the type of virtualization. Like the raw virtualization works in this way, and the common virtualization, just before we were speaking around this, the current technique, and we have different techniques across the frameworks due to the different limitations, but the current technique in the common virtualization is like we specify a different call span on the first and the last column to achieve like this in-between section, because in raw virtualization you can have the height explicitly set, but with the width it's a little bit different, so you can cover this. And we work around this by specifying a bigger number of call spans on the first and the last, just to simulate that we are in the middle of something.
Interesting. That's so cool. Okay, yeah, so you talked about row virtualization being, y'all are using the sandwich method, where you say you manipulate the heights of the top and bottom rows. And with the column base, it's kind of a similar thing, but since you can't essentially fix the width, you use call span as an attribute there. That is so genius. I love it. Thank you. I think people appreciate these details, and I think they take a lot of comfort now when developers are considering, hey, should I use Kendo React or Kendo Angular or whatever it may be. Knowing this, I feel like, at least for me as a developer, would put me at ease to know, like, okay, they've got it, yeah, and I can just build my application using this because they've got it. Sam, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, on the grid virtualization, and this is where our shared expertise comes in, because we have been doing grids for, .NET and JavaScript for the last 20 years. So some of it is like trade secrets, but we do some very smart things behind the scenes as well, like how you bind the grid to the data. There is an abstraction layer, and that abstraction layer can be very smart, because our grids are also, very feature rich. Like you want to be able to sort and filter and group. So what portion of the data set are you working on? Does it need to be the visual part, or does it need to be everything else that we need to go back to the server? So there is some smartness built right into the data, sets itself and how we do the fetch. So there's that, behind the scenes work. But to your point about open source, we love open source. Everybody does, until you need to keep the lights on, right? So again, open source does not always mean free. And if you do get a Kendo React license, we will give you the source code. So you are, at peace to use it however you want. But again, understand that the more you change, then the next time around we push out an update, it's your responsibility. But otherwise, we wanted Kendo React to be a solid library. As a developer, when you're building up your app, you could take, a dozen dependencies on a dozen frameworks and libraries, or you could just have one or two big ones, knowing that this is maintained by a set of professional engineers, and no one's going to getting hit by a bus and the library just disappearing. This is trying to give you more confidence. And you have mentioned this before. Kendo React is our us putting out the love to the React community. It is a very professional and a premium suite of UI, but we want to have a lower barrier to entry. If you are making a simple website for your church or bakery or your school, whatever, have at it. So get started. What we are doing in Kendo React Free is essentially about half of the library is for you to use without any strings attached. We don't even ask for any sign-ons, just npm install, go. Once you start realizing that you are getting to an enterprise level needs in terms of your performance or some really premium components like the grid, and then part of the grid is also free now, but the really enterprisey type of UI that you need, then you switch to the premium model.
Fantastic. What is that switch like?
Pretty darn smooth, honestly, because the components themselves are the same. So from a practical standpoint, if you're working with components that are premium and you don't have a license, you'll see a watermark. So you can still implement them. You can, try things out, kind of see how things will look on your page. They'll just have there's a little crisscross grid watermark that you wouldn't want on your final website. And when you get your license key in there, it takes the watermark off. But otherwise, it's really just using them, importing them exactly the same. You'll just add a secret license key file, and that's it.
There's so much that I want to ask you all about implementing license key verification in a library that someone can npm install. But maybe we'll do that later. I do want to come back to the data grid. Sam, you said the data grid is partially available as the free tier, which is incredible. I can't wait to use it. But I do want to circle back to the design affordances around this data grid, Kathryn. Data grids are complex. I think they're very complex. And I'm glad we're talking about something so complex as opposed to like, here's an unordered list.
You don't want to talk about buttons? You don't love buttons?
Or that. Yeah. But what design constraints and affordances does Kendo UI make or Kendo React make for the data grid to ensure, you mentioned earlier, it's not just something for developers, it also has a strong design element to it. How does that like manifest in the Kendo data grid?
I would say there's kind of a couple of different ways. So I kind of think of it as almost like customizations that happen on the design side and customizations that happen on the dev side. So in terms of features, you can opt in to include, right, the kind of filtering or sorting. There's features you can add or remove from the grid. And a lot of times we think about that as a development decision, but ultimately it is a design decision. It's a user experience decision. Because if you throw every single feature in the book at your user, you get this very complex data grid that you may not actually need. Some folks, if in really complex situations, may need every single, pagination, sorting, filtering, ordering, selecting, editing, every single feature on. A lot of folks won't. And part of the job of a designer is to think about what the user needs and what features you need to implement to meet that need without becoming overly complex and difficult to learn. So, right, we have our internal design team that has thought about kind of the layout and how they think features should interact. Then the developer can decide, okay, we need filtering and sorting. Maybe we don't need, ordering. Maybe we don't need drag and drop reordering of elements. Maybe we don't need, this or that. They opt into the features that they want on the development side when they implement the component. Designers have Figma kits. So we offer these Figma UI kits that have kind of exact breakdowns of all of our components. That includes all their different interaction states, when you hover things, when you open things, when you're all these different pieces, so that not only do they have a full understanding of the components and how they work and how folks interact with them, they can also use those. They can import those libraries into their Figma files and start to build mockups and fully interactive prototypes. They can do user testing from the Figma side before any code is implemented. They can change the design tokens and implement their own design systems or just add their brand colors if they're not at a full design system level, right? And all of that is customizable as well. So we're talking about, change the way the buttons look, change the way the drop downs look, change your colors, change your spacing, change your fonts, change everything. So it feels like a very straightforward question to be like, how do we handle design for the grid? And it's like, oh man, there's a lot of stages of that actually. And it really depends on, we have some users that are like, I just don't know design. I know our brand color is green and I need to make everything green. And you can do that super easy. Then
and you can do that from Figma.
Yeah, if you want.
And how does the Figma configuration with your design tokens make it to the code? Is there some type of, like, for example, with Tailwind-based code bases, you've got this configuration file and you just change a bunch of tokens in there and it follows through your code base. Is it similar?
Not quite. So we've got, I mentioned super briefly earlier, a product we have called the Theme Builder. And that is also free to use. You do have to register for that one, put your email in, make a login because it's a browser-based SaaS product. But it has a free tier, especially if you're just looking to like change colors. That's perfect. For folks that are looking for a little bit more advanced, you can pull from Figma into Theme Builder. And it's basically a WYSIWYG styling. You can map your Figma design tokens to our variables that we apply in the components and then export either like a minified CSS file or a SAS file, set of SAS files really, and drop them in, plug and play. So there's kind of a middle step there. We think that makes the most sense because that allows a place for it to live that's kind of shared, right? Figma makes the most sense for designers to work because that's where designers are comfortable. The code base makes the most sense for developers to work. That's where they're comfortable. But there needs to be somewhere that both parties can access, where they can make changes, where they can, collaborate and work together. And this looks good, this doesn't. Test out all the components, click on everything, make sure it works exactly the way you want, export the code.
And that's Theme Builder, sort of this bridging the gap between designers and developers. That's cool. I want to try Theme Builder. It's a difficult space because I do design and code, but there's usually two camps, and this is often a struggle with early startups, right? Like, how do we? And some startups go to war over these things. Like, hey, that's not the same 16 pixel gap that why is this 12? And so in my first job, actually, there was. We had to make web pages that looked like Figma pages, and the product people would load like the Figma full screen on one tab and
just one-to-one.
The implementation on the next tab, and they would like command 1 and 2 and just switch between these tabs rapidly to see like, oh, look, that's off by 2 pixels. Nightmares. But I'm glad there's Theme Builder to solve this problem. Sam, did you have something to add?
Just mentioning that Kathryn is the person who's written a book on this because we realized the friction, and it should never be a handoff. It should be a shared accountability. You need to have designers and developers from the get-go, so you understand the process and and the gives and gets that contributes towards a shared understanding and a product that everyone is on board with. But to Kathryn's previous point, like, we make it very clear because like not everybody has access to a designer, right? So like I am just by myself building an indie developer app for whatever my my school. I don't have access to a designer, and that's okay. So then I don't have to use Figma. I can just start with 4 or 5 different themes. If I wanted to customize something, I can open it up in Theme Builder. Maybe I want to change up some colors. Maybe I want to change up some states of some buttons or grids. And then once I'm happy, I export it out and I drop it, and it's good to go. But if I do have access to a designer and I'm working in a bigger team and we have a design system and a language, then let's all collaborate together once everyone's happy. And it's not a one-time thing. You can start shipping things in your app, but come back and say, no, this isn't working out in our A/B testing. Let's go back to design and just work things through again.
Yeah, I'll even jump in there and say one of the things I like most about Theme Builder is that there's version control, which is something that does not seem to have bled down to the design world for the most part, but it's brilliant. That was one of the first things when I switched over to doing more dev work. I was like, why do we not have something like Git? This is brilliant. Like, why can we not commit design changes? So the ability to like save versions and then roll back or jump forward, migrate our components to the newest, Kendo React release version, save that as a new version history. That it seems so obvious, but it's not in as many pieces of design software as I would like.
Totally. Like my first job was actually a design job, and I was surprised to find just a lot of like Illustrator files with like _v1, _v2, _v3. And
final, no release time.
Yeah, and I said, hey, have you all heard of this thing called Git? And of course they didn't, but they were like mind blown because like we were applying Git, which is typically associated with developer workflows and we started actually using Git with the designers, where I was like, visually you can just check out a branch and like put your final in this other branch, and they were like, whoa. So it's cool that theme. I'm curious from a product management perspective, It seems like, first of all, I want to applaud all of your work. It sounds like that it takes an actual village/army to build Kendo UI and Kendo React and then maintain like parity across all these versions. Kathryn, you mentioned there's a design team, which, what an investment. I'm curious about the product management decision to build something like Theme Builder. And this may predate many of your tenures there. I don't know how long, this has been in the works, but like, there comes a time, I think, in most startups where they're like, oh my goodness, the designers are not working well with the developers and the developers aren't working well with the design. Like, this gap makes itself known in startups. But most startups don't go like, you know what? We're going to build something like Theme Builder. And now it seems like you all have done this at Progress and are graciously sharing it with the community. But I'm curious, like, how? I mean, where did that come from as a product? You know what I mean? Because this problem is not unique, but your solution is unique, which I think is so cool.
Lots of trial and error. And this is when Sam has been with Progress longer than I have. This is my 4th year here. And when I joined, they were working on a product that became Theme Builder ultimately, but at the time was known as Unite UX. And it was kind of our like beta version. Kiril's like, oh yeah, Unite UX. And I remember seeing it and thinking like, wow, that's just really smart. And we kind of took that and we did a bunch of user testing and we got a bunch of feedback on it, and it evolved into the Theme Builder that we offer today, which does kind of what Unite UX was doing. Unite UX was a little bit more like when you were talking about like, tab A, tab B, and like flipping back and forth, and kind of almost a way to do, I don't want to call it like visual regression testing, but like where you could kind of bring in a Figma file and do a back and forth and tweak the component in real time and then export. And so we were kind of like, okay, let's broaden this. What if you can bring in from Figma? And what if you can also style your headers, your paragraph tags, your links, all of that in Theme Builder? So then you're starting to build this more kind of complete design. I don't even want to call it, it's not a design system because there's other pieces of that. But yeah, it's rather than having to export CSS and then add on to it and add on to it and add on to it. It's like, what if we had everything in Theme Builder? What if you could import components that you'd built in Figma? What if you could import this? What if you could make code edits in Theme Builder? Or what if you could do everything WYSIWYG? You could import the fonts that you purchased. You could import your custom icon sets. You could, just have it all in one space. And that just, I feel like I've said that made so much sense a billion times, but it just felt like something really obvious that I hadn't seen actually work yet. And to see it all kind of be there, it's like, oh, it's kind of a design repository, right? It's like, great. We've got our tokens, we've got our fonts, we've got our styling in terms of padding and margins and measurements and border radii and every little piece that would get documented in a design system. You can bring into Theme Builder, preview as applied to the Kendo components, and then export as CSS or Sass. It's like, yes. Thank God. Yes.
Yeah.
So to Kathryn's point, like trial and error, like a lot of it is when we are building products in the software world for developer or designer audiences, you might do your product research, but you are, not always sure what's going to stick. And we have tried a variety of things over the years. We started out, this is the whole, low code type solution where maybe you sit down with the designer, maybe you have a UX story. And then we tried for the longest time trying to spit out an Angular app or a React app. And that's a space that's really difficult to make everyone happy because these frameworks are always changing. Like how you start up a React app, there are like 5 ways of doing it. So you're not going to please everybody. Each development team or developer has their own ways of doing things. So we have kind of taken a step back to say, no, that's your domain, right? So let's have a platform, a surface area where we can just all collaborate on the same thing. And we're not talking code. We are just talking about the UI part of it. What's the UX going to be? What's the state? What's your template? What's your, style guidelines? Bring it all together. And that's something we can iterate on because that is a common language. We're not getting into the specifics of any, developer platform. And then you go from there because what you're importing is pretty standard stuff that you can drop in any app.
Great. And so, if I understand correctly, Theme Builder is specifically for Kendo UI. It deals primarily with that. What a resource! I think that's tremendous. In fact, I'm more eager about Theme Builder than I am about Kendo React because it's such a gap that y'all have recognized and filled. I do want to make sure that we get this for the listeners and in the show notes. Sam, you said Kathryn wrote the book on designer-developer collaboration. What is the name of that book, and where can people find it?
So I wrote a book, an ebook that's available for free. It's called Foundations of Design for Developers. I will have to pull up the URL at some other point to tell you where to find it, but if you Google that, you should find it. But yeah, it was really just born of, again, this kind of experience of being on kind of both sides of the equation, having worked as a designer and a developer, and seeing where that communication struggled. And one of the things I noticed was that a lot of times, especially, even during my design education, we learned a lot about the development side of things, about how CSS worked and the box model and the kind of terminology you need and, basic HTML, CSS implementation. I'm not saying that, I came out of that ready to be a software engineer, but I knew enough to communicate with developers. And it never felt like that was true the other way around, that a lot of developers were kind of looking for that language and that ability to communicate, and maybe even just the ability to do some basic implementation and feel a little bit more comfortable in the design world themselves. A lot of times I see people go like, ooh, not me, I couldn't draw a stick figure. And I'm always like, don't worry, it's all rectangles up in here, you're safe. but yeah, I just wanted something that would kind of help people communicate a little easier, create shared vocabulary, introduce some like really basic foundations around color and typography and balance and visual hierarchy, and just kind of give you the tools that you need to feel a little less intimidated working with design.
Another thing to add, something we have started doing perhaps like annually now is, understanding this state of designer-developer collaboration. So, at the start of the year, we put out a survey and it's open to everyone to chime in. And then we put out a report, like here's where we feel the community is, and we put that out as well. So again, it's just a pulse check to understand where things are at. And it helps us build the products that people, want to be using. And to one of your previous points, like I'm going to date myself right away because I'm in the vicinity of cool people doing JavaScript apps, but Theme Builder deals with some very basic tenets of design and how you translate that. So the styles that you agree upon, you can use them anywhere. Like you can use them in a Blazor app, you can use them in an ASP.NET app because it's CSS and Sass we're talking about.
Incredible. We'll put both those links in the show notes. I think the link to Kathryn's book and also to the survey, which is that finished yet or no? Is it still open?
It's done for 2024.
Okay.
Yeah, 2024 results are up, and I think in a couple months we'll be opening up again for 2025. So keep your eyes open.
Yeah, that's exciting. I want to ask actually Kiril specifically because. Kathryn, you mentioned you've studied design's your focus. Kiril, you mentioned that we were talking earlier that you've done a lot of the technical code work. What's that environment like? Given that Kathryn's there, and as Sam mentioned, you all have put a lot of focus and emphasis on working as a unified team with the gap between engineering and design bridged. How is that different, perhaps, to other working environments where design and development may not be as close, so to speak? Do you find yourself using terms like kerning and leading and things like that more often?
Okay, so first of all, I do not have a point of reference because this is my first job. Actually, I have been in working on Kendo React for the last 8 years, so I have been from day zero. So
Goodness.
I know everything about Kendo React. And I do not have a point of reference of other things, but I, as a developer, am comfortable working with designers. So we have found our common language, and obviously the tooling evolution through the years have greatly evolved this. I have started when Photoshop was the go-to tool for designs. So I used to be reading those Photoshop files with layers and layers just to show different states. This is the technique that we used. Then I believe by the time of when we had Sketch and the early days of the Figma, everything like snatched together and started making sense. And we started using the terms variables or tokens. And by that time, we have maybe, and the product team experienced the need to invest in tooling like Team Builder, because customers of ours, first of all, we have our support system that you can send a ticket and someone from the team will reply in some dedicated time, and you can get an answer for me. So I can help you with your CSS, with your components, things like that. But through this feedback, we have experienced the need to do such tooling, because when the customers come, I want to change the color of this button from green to blue. And I, as an expert, know that you do not want to do that. You do not want to override this. Probably you do not want to override this specific color. So there's this bigger thing, which we call a design system. That's the Kendo design system that has all those connections, between the variables and the components and how you consume them. So the Team Builder as a tool is a great way or a playground to see if you change something, what would it affect, and how do you approach like those bigger customizations, not only in terms of colors, but everything from design perspective, and how would it affect the whole library or your whole page, to say.
Wow, 8 years at one company. My goodness. That's awesome. I'm slightly jealous. I've never ever lasted this long. Probably because I'm the common denominator. Anyway, but this isn't a therapy session. No, that's great. Wow, your first and only job. So cool. Yeah, I would trust you even more now with Kendo UI, as in if I was to adopt this as a company, because like, goodness, there's people who just spend their entire career working on it. I think it's a powerful statement when you say, as a developer, I'm comfortable with design. That is rare from what I've seen. And it's just a testament to the good work that y'all are doing there. We've used the term design system multiple times so far. And I'm just super aware that there's people listening to this who have no idea what that means. There's people listening to this who will say things like, and I know this because we meet, fortunately, in real life with people who listen, and they complain sometimes, and they say like, hey, you use terms that I don't know. Anyway, but the design system, some people think they will literally define it as, oh yeah, I heard from Brad Frost about atomic design. Is that a design system? And so this is the working definition of like the vast majority of at least people who listen to this podcast. I hope they're not offended. It's just the truth. So with that, can we maybe outline, just like for the purpose of our discussion so far and henceforth, what do we mean by design system here?
Yeah. So a design system is going to be a collection of all of your design assets. And that will include some of the really obvious kind of brand guideline type stuff that you'll think
Like
of right off
fonts
the
and
bat.
colors.
Your fonts and colors. Yep. Sometimes people will always think about logos. Yep. Those are in there, right? But in addition to that, it's also things like grid systems, page templates, patterns, and kind of blocks of, if you've got a couple components that are always laid out in the same way. You always have a card component that has an image and text and a button. That might be a pattern that you've captured in your design system library, right? It could include things like tone of voice guidelines about how you write, if you are, if you're a more casually worded app, your buttons might say like, yep, instead of yes, or like, let's go instead of next,
Wow.
right? And a lot of that changes how you're perceived. All of that kind of comes together to create a full user experience. And so I would say any piece that you want to reuse, right, that will show up, I'm gonna say more than twice in your application. That could be text, it could be a component, it could be a color, it could be a layout, anything. A design system is just a place to hold all that. So
That's an awesome definition. It's a massive repository of everything that's identifying your brand in your brand's style. So would it be a stretch to say that it's just brand guidelines?
It's not wrong, but I think because the idea of brand guidelines kind of existed pre-design system, it can be a little confusing, right? Especially, right? Like I worked in agency life for many years doing ad agency stuff. And when you get brand guidelines from a client in that perspective, what you're getting is colors and logos and that little sheet of how not to use logos where they get to use the logos wrong intentionally and be like, don't flip it upside down. You're like, yeah, I need that. But right, brand guidelines tends to have a very specific understanding. And something like that, you might not expect to get a component library as part of your brand guidelines, but it could very much be part of your design system.
So then each thing in a design system, if a design system is a repository of everything in your company's repertoire, are those tokens then? Are those design tokens? Is each thing called a design token? Because that's another term we use quite a lot in the industry, and there's confusion about that.
So I think about tokens as the very smallest aspect. You mentioned Brad Frost and his atomic design. I don't even want to call it a theory at this point. That's just accepted verbiage now. But right, the idea being that we build up from the very smallest pieces. So a design token might be something like a single color or a single, text configuration. Headers look like this. They're bold and they use this font and they have, this pixel size. Any of those individual things could be captured in a token. And we apply those tokens to larger elements, So we have a card that has a header at the top and then an image and then a button, and the button uses the color and the header uses the token with the text. And then that card is on a page, it's in a grid layout with a bunch of other cards. And so you kind of build up. All these pieces get put together like Lego to create a finished app.
So tokens are the atoms, more or less. Fantastic. Wow, thank you. This is so great. I think there's a lot of people who are going to listen to this and actually come back to me at conferences, hopefully, and be like, oh, it makes sense now. Thank you for unlocking that. They do that too sometimes. That's when I fortunately meet them. I'm curious about so let's say I listen to this. This is great. I love Kendo React and Kendo UI, at least everything I've heard. I want to give it a try, but I've got an existing application. Is Kendo React something that can be incrementally adopted, or does it have to be the whole app? Is it suitable for brownfield use cases?
I think it's a good fit for that. And Kiril can talk a little bit about how we break out our packages for components. So you don't have to install everything. You can install just the NPM packages for the components that you want. We've got them kind of grouped in small, manageable pieces, which I think makes it really good for integration. And I think of it the same way as you would upgrade anything, any kind of refactoring project like that, where you kind of, this week we're going to replace all the buttons with Kendo buttons, and next week we're going to replace all the forms with Kendo inputs. And as you do that, you can just bring in the package you need, swap out, move on. Or I guess, I don't think I would recommend mixing. You could leave everything and just build whatever new you do with Kendo. But that feels like that would be harder to maintain from the designer in me doesn't like that. That sounds hard to style.
Absolutely. And most of people reach out to us when they reach this point of needing a more complex component, or, as I joke, start implementing a drop-down list on themselves. Because as simple as it looks, there's a lot of things going on in a simple drop-down list, but you can gradually just use whatever you need. And for some of the things inside Kendo React, obviously not everything can be packaged as a component. Depending on your framework, we can ship you, for example, a React hook, which helps you for something which we are using internally. But as with everything, as early in the development process, as you adopt some of our things, start getting used to them, things would look similar. To say, if you're using our buttons, if you're using our grid, you're partially using our whole design system. So it will be easier for you to standardize on those things. This is part of the reason that we are allowing free usage of most of our components, just so you can build your application. If you do not need a whole data grid, feel free to use our free components. They are perfectly fine for your application. And if you experience the need of some of those more complex features that we provide, it's just an upgrade, as we say, just activating your license.
That sounds really, really straightforward. More straightforward than I think many expect, which is fantastic. The question that I come with, because it sounds like if I have a brownfield project, I want to adopt Kendo React. I can, as you mentioned, incrementally do so with a component or components. And like, Kathryn, you said, like, let's replace all the buttons first and then the cards and then so on. And I would assume I would use Theme Builder to first match the styles and then adopt these things so that it looks almost indistinguishable from my other components. This makes sense. But I guess the question next is, cool, the aesthetic is sorted, but what about state management, right? Because like if it's a brownfield project, I'm going to have components managing state, some of them consuming context, some of them with maybe messy state even. Maybe we've got some render children as props type stuff going on. The question I'm asking is, how does Kendo React at the component level and maybe at the whole holistic library level manage state internally? And is that state then pluggable that it lends itself well to like brownfield projects where state comes from some external store?
I guess that's a question for me. So basically, one of the advantages of doing everything in the framework that you're building it is you can take full advantage of the state management in React, state management in Angular. For the React components, what we try to achieve, and we are successful, is like having both controlled and uncontrolled state. So if you do not want to manage this from inside, if this state is coming from somewhere, from a server, from like other component, like a Redux store, Zusten, Jotai, whatever you prefer, you just communicate the new state with us. And your state will always take priority over our internal state management.
And this is via props that you can
Yeah. So you're interacting with the component in the React world with props, with in the Angular with attribute fields and things like that. So, but if you want like just here's the data, and I want to be able to filter it, sort it, group it, but that's up to you. This is in the context of the grid. You know how to do it. We also have this uncontrolled mode, which we call, which is like we'll take control of the state. You just give us the data, and we will allow your customers essentially to filter it, sort it without you worrying about it. But if you have your own state that you want to take priority, just communicate these three properties and it will always be taken into consideration.
At the implementation level, is that like if-else based? Meaning if prop is set, then use prop, otherwise use our internal state management?
Yes, but it takes a lot of effort to make everything as pure as you make it sound. So there's a lot of effort to structure your component that there is not take it from here and then from here and then from here. Everything should be really organized and really straightforward. Like this is the filter and this is the filter through the whole component. So read it from a single place, update it through a single place, communicate it through a single place. And this is a challenge that we are tackling with every single implementation, every single component. And this is, I believe, where the expertise from years and years and years of implementing your AI components comes from.
Yeah. About the internal architecture of the theming system, it sounds like this isn't really library or framework specific because it's CSS or Sass based, right? So like Kendo React wouldn't really need any specifics around styling unless I'm missing something where it just like reads from a SCSS file.
Yeah. Oh,
I can expand a little bit on that. Yeah. So for a long time, we were doing like Sass-based customization. We know some other UI components, and especially in the React world, some people reach out to some kind of CSS in JS, like styled components, linear, and things like that. We were a little bit conservative on this side. We were sticking with Sass, and we still have Sass support for Sass-based customization. But recently, we have like opened the door by allowing both Sass and CSS variables and things like linked together, so you can achieve the same types of customization through Sass and CSS variables. And obviously, CSS has evolved just enough. I don't want to say much when compared to JavaScript, but just enough so it's absolutely okay to use it without a pre or post processor. So this has allowed us to be really dynamic in terms of styling, use CSS variables in the runtime. And this has unlocked some capabilities in our internal tooling like Team Builder and things like that.
Does Kendo React Let's talk about bundle size, because this is the biggest complaint. Yeah, like everything's huge and we load way too much JavaScript, and more JavaScript, more problems. And you have now newer libraries and frameworks like Quick, which will progressively load JavaScript. So you start with 1 kilobyte, and then you go, the more the user uses it, you only load JavaScript that the users need. What's the Kendo React story around bundle size? I know, and look, you've mentioned there's a team, there's expertise, so I have to believe there's like a story here that is complex. There's all kinds of tree shaking mechanisms, maybe some lazy look. You mentioned drop-down components are complex, and so if it's a drop-down and your thing that actually drops down needs to be rendered, you can lazy load that, for example. I'm curious if we could speak a little bit to the bundle size considerations around Kendo React and maybe Kendo UI.
Yeah, I guess that's back-to-back questions to me. So basically, we have split the whole Kendo React library, which is 135 components or more. Don't quote me on that. But we have split them across multiple packages, npm packages, so you can consume them everything individually. But in the context of a bigger component from ours, like the grid, obviously the grid needs the drop-downs and the date pickers for being the filtering, the editing, and things like that. So we're working around what the framework and the bundlers out there offer, just so we can strip down as much as JavaScript as we can if you're not using this or that feature. And it's, again, different for each framework because the bundlers are different. For example, with the Angular, we have the Angular CLI, which is a common place for everything. But for React, we have the Next.js used as a bundler. We have Vite used as a bundler. Historically, we have had a lot of problems with tree shaking in Create React App, which finally has been deprecated for my own joy. But we are working around... we're looking to support the tooling and staying up ahead, so the tooling can do the tree shaking for you, so you can take full advantage. But this is more of a distribution side. We're not doing something specifically. We're just following the best practices and the latest industry standards, so we can support you with the latest bundlers.
What's the advice to use Kendo React correctly? Because like a lot of folks will import things in a way that opts them out of tree shaking, depending on the bundler. Is there best practices for importing and working with Kendo React components?
Just use the package that you're currently needing. So for convenience and for some edge use cases, we have a common package that distributes everything. But this is more to cover like scenarios like CDN and things like that.
So you would say don't use that?
Don't use that if you do not know what you're doing. So if you need the grid, you install the grid package. If you need the drop-downs, you install the drop-down package. And obviously, we will do the heavy lifting. If the grid needs the drop-downs and other things, we make sure that those gets installed in the right order and are available when you need them. And speaking of bundle size, I want to expand a little bit specifically on the React side with the recent development of React Server components. So we took a big experiment over there, and we actually realized that we can shove off some chunks of JavaScript if we take advantage of React Server components. And we have engineered, we're running this with the grid currently only, but you can use our data grid in React Server Components mode. This is how we are calling it. And obviously you can use it only in Next.js currently. But if you're using it in Next.js in React Server Components mode, we strip even more JavaScript just by being flexible with how we separate client-specific logic and what we call is environment agnostic logic. So if things should not go to the client, we separate this into a separate file, just to take advantage if someone is using it in Next.js. I say a big if because obviously you need support for React Server components. Currently, this is the only framework that provide it.
How does one opt into React Server components mode for the data grid? That's so interesting because you call it this. So because for me, if I import the grid, import grid from package, use the component. I'm wondering how I would specify. No, I want the one from. So is it just I change the import to grid/server components or something?
No. It's in the just as the React team is describing it, you do not opt into server components mode, you opt into client mode. So by default in Next.js, using the app router, this I believe as the requirements, by default you are in server components mode, and our component internally detects it. So there's not like a specific detection, but just works in this way. And you opt out of server components mode by adding the use client directive at the top of your file. But there's a lot of requirements for this to happen. There is not like RSC mode equals true, because this wouldn't work without the bondwars and things like that. So this is an optimization on a bondwar level, not specifically on API and props level.
Fantastic. That's such a great answer. And I'm assuming the detection is something like we check if window is defined.
It's a bit smarter than that, but I do not want to deep dive into details because it's a little bit hacky. Obviously, the whole community is a little bit torn of how to consume these server components, so we are doing our best.
Great. No, I love hacky, but I will save you the feeling of having to divulge that. I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about design systems, because I've worked at, again, many early startups, and it's different every time. It's different. So like I've never, for example, heard it being this like grab bag for everything related to the brand, which I love. I think that's the simplest is often the best. I've seen design systems go well, and I've seen them go wrong. I'm sure many of us here have. How does one measure the success of a design system? Like, is it working? Is it not working? If I was to think of, okay, let's start a brand new company, we're going to build a design system. Maybe the easiest approach is to think about, okay, what do we have? What do we have as a logo? What do we have as fonts? What do we have as messaging? What do we have as button labels? Do we say let's go, or do we say accept? What do we have on the buttons that close modals? Do we just have an X? Do we have dismiss? Like, and I would just like throw all of that in like a big document. Is that maybe too simple? Like, what's the best way, I guess, to measure one, a design system is working for the organization, and two, even creating and maintaining one going forward? And maybe as a bonus point, how does it work at Progress?
I love a bonus point. Let's see. So in terms of success, I would measure a design system with kind of two sides, right? So there's kind of internal success and external success. So external success is your design system creating a user experience that is good, successful, and meeting user needs, right? Is it connected to what users want? Is it testing well when you're doing usability testing or when you're getting user feedback? Is everything making sense? Is it cohesive? Right. The other side of that, I think, is internal, which is that a lot of places where I've been, where you start up a design system, half the battle is internal adoption. Because unless it is a truly greenfield project and you start with a design system, which is incredibly rare, I would say, then you are implementing a design system and trying to get designers, developers, copywriters, anybody who's touching the product has to then be touching the design system, or at the very least, reading it. So it's kind of the like age-old, how do you get developers to read documentation? You know? So it's a similar kind of thing. So I would measure adoption from that perspective in terms of, are we seeing components being taken from the component library, or are developers writing them from scratch? Are we seeing designers use the predefined tokens, or are we seeing hex codes? Like measuring whether we're seeing those things pop up, whether, how many one-offs are we seeing? Because there's a lot of like, well, I just need this one thing, and then the one thing gets used 5 times in 5 slightly different ways. So I would look at adoption success from that perspective, and then also implementation success from a user side as to whether what you've got is the right stuff to have in there, whether it's working well, whether we need to go back and tweak messaging or change colors or whatever it may be.
And I would add up on that a great design system is the one that you do not think about too much. Like if you're thinking about it, you're mostly fighting with it. Oh, it's limiting me. It's not the one. A good implementation of the design system would just let you do your work more effectively and not think too much about that. You have this thing and it's called a design system. You just reach out for being a component, a logo, a color, whatever you need to do your job effectively.
Yeah.
And I think that's so valuable. It also, your point, Kiril, was exceptional about it. How often are you thinking about it, I guess, is the measure of like, is this working or not? Because I've worked at some companies where the design system wasn't working in the way that we were thinking about it a lot, because there was constantly new features and designs that required augmenting the existing drop down, the existing select component. It's and we kept going back and touching this thing to the point where it had like between 32 and 50 props about like, is it this state, is it that state, is it loading, does it have a filter, and at some point, like months later, we looked at this thing and we're like, wow, that's a Frankenstein select component. What's the best practice in that kind of scenario? Or rather, let me ask you this: the select component in Kendo React, how many props does it have? You know what I mean? Like, how do you protect against if your design system is not serving you, just creating like a giant mishmash of a component?
My general approach to that, and I will tell you, I don't have the number of props in our drop-down memorized. Kiril might.
Neither do I.
So it's like 300 then.
Yeah. But my general approach to that when I'm creating design systems or creating, custom component libraries, is that I think the inclination is always to be incredibly opinionated. You think, I will make this component that locks in, that won't let you, from a development implementation standpoint, won't let you do things that breaks it from a design perspective. And as much as I wanted that to be true, I think you end up in the 300 prop zone when you do that. The solution that I found before I was at Progress, I was building design systems and component libraries custom for companies. And I did that twice at two different companies. And what I found was the right balance was to make the component itself structurally flexible and then narrow in how it should be used in the written documentation, which admittedly is less enforceable, but you end up iterating less on the actual component itself. So it's not to say, you create 1,000 props that will only let you do something if you pass it in this specific way, because then it becomes too hard to use and people say, screw this, I know how to make my own drop down, and you start seeing that and you lose that adoption. But if you can say, here's our, select component, here's how you use it. When we implement it, we want it in this way. We don't want more than however many options. We don't want, whatever. It should only be no more than this wide. I'm trying to think of arbitrary design implementation things. But if you build in a max width on the component itself, that will inevitably come back to bite you. So is it perfect? I don't know, yeah, but that's what I found to work.
I appreciate this structural flexibility you mentioned. I'm just wondering what this looks like in practice. I think, could it look something like Ryan Florence made this UI library a long time ago, Reach UI, which when I hear structural flexibility, I think of that. It had nothing, right? It's kind of like Kent C. Dodds' downshift as well, which was just like there's no opinions here. It's very flexible. It will just give you like a drop down, but it's maximum accessibility, and the rest is up to you. Is that what we mean by structural flexibility?
That is what I was talking about. I think the other asterisk that I want to put on this is that it depends on your use case. So, right, when I was building those libraries, I was working on those teams and I was building completely custom libraries for a development team of 10. So I knew everyone who would be using the components that I built. And I knew, the things that they liked to do or didn't like to do and who would listen to me and who wouldn't. And the kinds of things that would need to be the guardrails that you would need to build in, and you kind of start to think about that. It's a different beast when we're talking about something like Kendo React. We don't know every single developer who will implement Kendo React. And so the attitude and the approach that you take when you're thinking about, I'm building something for my company versus I'm building something for public use, just different problem solving approaches. Some require more or less, opinionated of an approach.
And I want to briefly mention that design systems usually have a purpose. Like Material UI had the purpose of resolving user interface on mobile devices. When with our design system, it's more of a design system to help you build your design system. So we guide you, we put good practices, but we won't exactly prevent you from doing something that you believe would be beneficial for you. This is both in terms of design, in terms of functionality. So if you want to build on top of our components, like override something, just as with the control state, if you want to always take control of something and say, hey, this is how it works, I do not like your defaults, that's up to you. We allow this, and we strategically build our components toward this goal to enable you to be efficient, not for us to brag that we have invented the best virtualization logic, the best selection method, and things like that.
Fantastic. I think that's a nice roundup. I want to talk about Progress and the relationship with Progress and Kendo. So if I go to progress.com, I see in big letters like unleash the power of AI for your business. And I'm like, that's great. And then you have like an entire team devoted to a component library and a design system. What's the connection? I guess, does that make sense? Is that a fair question? Like, I think it's great that a company like Progress will invest in having a team like y'all to create Kendo UI and all the variants, and then support that financially and give that to developers on the free tier. That's fantastic. But I guess it's sort of weird, right? It's like Walmart. They have retail stores, and they're like, here, we're gonna do a design system team now. I mean, can we bridge that gap somehow? I'm curious about this. The relationship.
I can try taking that. Okay, so we are a big company, and we have
how big?
Just pure numbers, about 3,000 plus.
Oh, that was slower. I was gonna say 2,500. So you're. I was low.
Wow. Okay, so 3,000 people that help companies unlock the power of AI. Is it consulting? What's the business model?
No, it's mostly product. So we do professional services. Okay, so we do professional services when it makes sense. Like if you are trying to do something and you just do not have the resources, or you need somebody to come and do a POC for you, we'll come and help you out. But that's not the core. It's products. So we have some big pillars in the company. We have what's called digital experiences, which is our team and our division business organization. Then we have a data business organization. Then we have infrastructure. And you mentioned AI, like that's a whole beast by itself. But we try to share as much as we can. So the individual business units, the divisions, are trying to do individual things. So the whole application dev lifecycle, it's huge. We're trying to solve chunks of the problem with specific, and targeted expertise towards building UI components, towards building libraries and testing solutions and network debugging solutions. We with the Kendo React team, we are just focused on making React developers productive, and then we benefit from everything else that the rest of the company and the rest of the engineering folks are doing.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. I had no idea that Progress was like essentially like Microsoft. Yeah, they make a bunch of tools and software, and there's team it's like Microsoft has a VS Code team and a Copilot team and a Windows team, and these are different products, and there's teams for them.
Yeah, so they all work together, right?
Yeah.
When I first onboarded, someone told me that Progress was the biggest software company you've never heard of. And I was like, yeah, I think maybe so. Because Progress itself is like 40 years old, right? Like the whole of the company. We've been around.
Not many software companies can say that. We started out with a very back in the 60s, like early days of computing, like we had our own database, and then we built an ID and a programming stack on top of it. It's still around and it's still going strong. But yeah, Microsoft celebrated 50 years recently. So like to your point, like, yeah, we are a big software company, but we have, very close partnerships with Microsoft, with AWS, with Google, with, the Meta folks, React World. And again, all of this is to give developers flexibility. So you choose the stack, you choose the tools to help you be more successful.
That's fantastic. It is the biggest software company I've never heard of until today. Thank you for clarifying that. We've talked a lot about design systems. We've talked a lot about the internals of Kendo React and Kendo UI, state management, code splitting, lazy loading, etc. What resources would you recommend for developers looking to learn more about this? I mean, obviously, the biggest resource is npm install Kendo UI's free tier and play with it. I think really that's honestly the best way to learn is just like hands-on experience. And so if I was to just riff off of my own instinct, I would go try out Kendo React for free and use Theme Builder with it to build my own aesthetic and actually just build something, whatever it may be. In fact, I had an idea today to build some type of SaaS product that I forgot. But like we all get ideas now and then. So I'll say this: the next thing I build will probably be with Kendo UI. I have a question about that just came to me. But okay, so let's clear this first one though. That's my sort of instinct on learning more about design systems and Kendo UI. Are there resources maybe that I'm missing that could be helpful for the developer community listening?
Well, it sounds obvious to say we have documentation, but of course we have vast documentation. We also have blogs. We have a YouTube channel where you can find more. We have a knowledge base. So if you're new and kind of learning your way through Kendo React for the first time, we've got kind of tutorial videos that can help you get your feet under you and get up and going super fast. We have a Twitch channel where we stream occasionally called Code It Live. I'm trying to think of what else we've got.
We actually do what's called a virtual classroom. So essentially, you want to get started with Kendo React and you don't want to read a whole bunch of stuff, just sit down with us. We'll walk you through a series of videos to take you from A to Z. Here's everything you need to know. And we are known for standing by you. So as you start using Kendo React, you're invariably going to have questions like, how do I do this? Give us a support ticket. We are kind of legendary in trying to support you. And when you do give us a support ticket, it's not some random person. It is Kiril who's going to look at it. So the people who build the products are the same ones who get back to you. So core engineering.
It's true. We also have an open forum for all of our users. So users can also answer questions from other users. And each of the libraries has a developer advocate. So you can always bug one of us. So like I'm the developer advocate for Kendo React. Sam handles the .NET stuff. My friend Alyssa, it does Angular, and Ed does Blazor. So you can always ping one of us on whatever, Twitter, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, we're everywhere.
Sounds so active. I so appreciate that. Honestly, as a developer and maybe just a human being, I hear support ticket and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Because like support tickets so like enterprisey. But
We're
I guess
enterprisey. Yeah, that's us. But no, there are other routes. If you're not feeling enterprisey, then throw something in the forum and let other users get back to you, or DM one of us.
And just to make sure, I want to nail these things down that we've discussed today, because I really want people to like get these as takeaways. And we'll put all the support modalities also in the show notes. You mentioned, I started the discussion by asking, what's the uniqueness factor? And I want people to listen to this who are like maybe in the process of currently evaluating solutions for UI component libraries. They're literally having the discussion right now, like, hey, should we use ShadCN? Should we use Material? Should we use whatever? I want to make this statement, and I want you to validate it or not. That for teams who are currently evaluating solutions to UI libraries, the appeal of Kendo UI is, or Kendo React even, Kendo UI is that it one applies to a wide variety of front-end libraries. Two, it has a wide array of variety in components, including sophisticated components like Data Grid, which is available for free, partially. And you've got the team of you all doing support, but also like from what we talked about, it sounds like a larger team of designers, developers kind of working full-time, literally full-time, to make sure that the library is everything an organization would need. Is there more advice than that for teams evaluating UI component libraries?
I can go with just a offbeat comment. Don't trust anything we have said so far. Okay, go play with it yourself, right? Because you know your app's needs and your teams and your organization needs the best. And if you're by yourself doing indie work, you know your needs. So evaluate. Don't just go off what a website says. Try a few components. See what the doc experience, see what the developer experience is like. Are you wanting to not read docs? If you just want to start with VS Code as an extension, get going. Have at it, but try a few things. Maybe ask a few questions. Ping us on Reddit, ping us wherever you want to be, and see what the experience is like. And then you decide. But yeah, Kathryn, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece we've talked it quite a bit, but I think about it as a whole design approach, right? Is that it's more than just a developer tool, it's also a designer tool, and it's also a process and an approach that looks at user experience and accessibility equally to performance and developer experience, right? Because that's developer side is just one piece of the puzzle.
Definitely.
But you can trust us on one single thing, just to wrap those things up. If there is a major framework coming up and you want to build your application, we will be there. If the whole industry is building this type of application, we will provide the components to enable you. If there is a new design trend, we will cover it. So we are here to stay, and we want to be your partner, not for this single project, for this single component, but through the whole process of your business or thing growing, and we want to grow with you.
You mentioned a good thing, Kiril, because I built a startup that's very stealth and nobody's like using it yet. But I should stop saying unfortunately instinctively. Anyway, unfortunately, I did speak to some investors about it and showed them demos and stuff. It's a product. It works. And this entire product is built with Astro. And I will say this, Astro is my go-to now for building applications. It's not React anymore, for various reasons. Like Next.js and the app router really broke me. And so Astro just does a tremendous job. I'm curious if Kendo has a version for Astro, or will have a version for Astro, or if I should just use Kendo React in Astro.
I can cover this. So we are testing against all major frameworks, tooling, and bundlers. There is not a specific version of Kendo that is specifically designed for Astro, but obviously in Astro you can have different frontends. So if we have this frontend as a flavor of Kendo, we will be covering Astro, just like we are covering Next.js, just like we are covering Vite and all the surrounding tooling.
Great. What's the most surprising feedback you've received about Kendo UI?
It's all thinking.
Yeah. Most recently, people have just been surprised to hear that we've added the free tier. A lot of folks knew us before. We were commercial for many, many years. And so sometimes, I don't think it was surprising that some folks were like, yeah, that's just not in the budget for me at this time. Totally understandable. But now we'll be like, oh, but did you know you can still use it? We've got, 60 free components, and they're always a little shocked. So if you heard of us once before, give us a second look.
Okay, so I can mention two things actually, going off what Kiril said. So when the underlying frameworks evolve, right, you want somebody who can stand by you. So if Next.js changes, if Astro changes, if Vite changes, or if React comes out with a new version, Angular comes out with a new version, 0-day support. So I've seen people getting surprised by that, but yeah, we will ride the bleeding edge with you, but we also want to stand, give you support for older things as well.
Incredible.
I would say that would be, are you really rewriting all of the components for each individual framework? And I was like, yeah, we want you to take full advantage. And with this, I just want to say thanks for having me. I have to go, and goodbye.
Goodbye, Kiril. That's it was nice appreciate your insights. We're almost done here anyway, in a few more minutes, but thanks for your contributions. It's been very, very valuable. If you could change one thing about how teams approach UI design and development, what would it be?
Collaborate early and often. I think a lot of folks, I know the agile waterfall thing was like whatever 10 years ago now. We seem to think we've moved past it, and we're not. Lots of folks are still doing waterfall and just not calling it that. I think that's especially true when you broaden that spectrum from just development and into design and development, where it's incredibly waterfall-y and handoff-y, right? So like, I would say talk early, talk often, stay engaged, both sides throughout the entirety of the project. Developers should be involved in the design portion. Designers should be involved in the development portion. Don't let the handoff be past tense for you.
Do you think the reason that goes wrong so often is just because of like hyper capitalism and like everybody has to ship instantly and you don't have time to talk?
I think there's definitely some of that. I think there's a feeling of discomfort in moving outside of your realm of expertise. I think there's sometimes a feeling of that's not my job or not my problem. And I think there's a little bit of the move fast and break things culture that we still haven't entirely shaken off. And all of that kind of combines into this like next, almost, the relay race and the passing of the batons. But I'm just not convinced that that's the right way to build really good software.
Amen. There's a really great book called Slow Work by Dr. Cal Newport, which it's one of my favorites because it's about the value of actually like working slowly but thoroughly, and not kind of just going from next to next. Okay, we've got 2 questions left, and then we'll wrap it up. I want to know what emerging tech. You mentioned, Sam. You mentioned we'll build the bleeding edge with you. You just said that. The edge is bleeding these days. Things like model context protocol and all kinds of AI features, but also not AI, right? Like there's new features coming to CSS and the JavaScript language specification as well. What emerging technologies are you both personally most excited about beyond UI components, or even to do with UI components?
I mean, it's AI, all the things, right? It's hard to do anything without AI, but we are looking at all possible things. So from a siloed perspective, anything new coming up in Angular, React, we want to be there with you, building up UI components that let you ride the latest of waves. But if you take a step back and look at the broader picture of how enterprises are building software, are you just vibe coding, or are you an indie developer? What exactly all are you doing with AI? So our stance so far has been we don't want to be judgmental. Right, so we will build you a few UI components. We actually have some AI prompts built in. So a lot of the times when you're trying to integrate with ChatGPT or whatever be your AI model of choice, you are building some UI, like how you show that experience in your app. So we want to help out, but that's agnostic. So we don't care which one you choose, what type of thing you use to integrate with. So that's on the UI front. However, we also care about your productivity. So are you using Claude Code? Are you using VS Code? Are you using Cursor? Can we make you a little bit more productive, right? So we know our UI really, really well. We know our docs, and much of it is surfaced by the AI models, but there are some gaps. So where we want to come in is understand where those gaps are and where AI models might be hallucinating, right? So we don't want that for productivity. So we want to, try things out with the RAG. Like, can we train models that are very contextual, that knows exactly what our docs look like? We want to spit out absolutely runnable code that you can just drop in, and you have the confidence of doing so. Can we also expose more of our services? You mentioned model context protocol. That's one way. Now we are having agents talk to each other, agents leveraging tools which know specific things. So maybe you dropped Kendo React in your UI. You want to know how you test it. You want to know what happens when I throw this into a CI/CD build pipeline. How do I deploy this? Maybe we build tools that take care of this stuff. How do we pull down your dependencies? So think about tools for everything. And then maybe you could, right now you could go to any, AI coding assistants and say, give me a grid with these features. Your mileage is going to vary based on who you ask and what exactly you're asking. Prompts matter. It's not, it's not to replace what we do. It's it's a tool for a craftsperson, right? So we want to be meeting you, trying to boost your productivity as you're using Kendo React. So all of those are things we are thinking. We want to be exposing our knowledge, because there are things like with our forums that are not open to AI models and just grokking through. Those are our assets, but we expose those out to you. And if you look at a few years down the line, if you come and say, build me a React app, a full-on app with these 10 different UI components, pulled from this database, integrate with this service, what does that look like? Right now, you're starting to see some traction, but the quality isn't quite there. So we want to be able to spit out Kendo React, so you know what you're getting from the people who make the things that you're using.
Incredible. I think a great thing that Kendo React can tie in very nicely with is, so now the trend is towards tan stack router, as I'm sure you're familiar with, because like as Kiril mentioned, Create React App has gone away, and for some time the prevalent advice was like just use Next.js, but people started asking, okay, but what about Vite? What about Vite for like client only applications? What's the answer to? I don't want the whole server and all this. I just want client only. And there was no answer for that for a while. And so TanStack saw the opportunity, right, to sort of fill that gap. And so TanStack Router now is the thing. So instead of Create React App, there's Create TanStack Router App that is basically the successor to this. And this project exposes a model context protocol server where you can create a React app with cursor with TanStack Router, and it will incrementally pull in like various TanStack, like TanStack query. It will pull in TanStack components as needed, and it just knows how to do that because it has a model context protocol agent. I would love to see sort of like a Kendo React MCP server also that would then make this entire end-to-end workflow possible, where I'm like, hey, give me a React app with TanStack that has a data grid for the current sales on the stock market, and it would just do that with Kendo React because it's combining these MCP servers. That'd be phenomenal. And just to echo, I think that's quite exciting for the future of it. It's kind of unsurprising that it's AI oriented, but I can't wait to see what that looks like. Also, if I can make a request for a feature, I think like v0.dev is cool, but it's exclusively tied to Shad CN UI. And imagine a Kendo React answer to this. Whoa, that'd be incredible.
So this is not being recorded. We are not on the internet in any way, right? So I can say things without context. But yes, we are looking at all of those things. Our expertise is building these UI components that are well engineered, have a solid developer experience. We just want to surface this up to however you're using it, right? So it's model context protocol today, maybe it's something else tomorrow, but in the agentic world, in the agentic workflows, in the agentic marketplaces, in all these different ways in which you are considering bringing your ideas and making it into an app, we want to be right there. Because we know how to do UI well, and that's where we can throw in our expertise.
I'll also throw in, as a quick little tag on that, you said, I want to make a request. It's like, yes. First off, yes, and please. Second off, we genuinely love that. We have a feedback form for that. We have a public roadmap, and there's an opportunities to suggest things, and we actually take that quite seriously. And when there's enough of a push for something, it bumps it up in our priority list on the dev side. So with all seriousness in the world, I think that would be very cool. And if you suggest it, and I suggest it, and maybe 10 of our friends suggest it, I think we could get that a very solid push with the dev team.
Feedback.kendoui, Telerik.kendoui, or feedback.telerik.com, feedback.kendoui.com. That's where we are at, and every sprint, the PMs are looking at those things every time. And I mentioned Telerik because that's the other side, because when you look at the UI stack, we're talking all things JavaScript, but we also have 20 years of experience building .NET UI for everything mobile, desktop, web you can think of. That's all the Telerik side. So clear distinction. Telerik is for all things .NET. Kendo UI is for all things JavaScript. And, again, our expertise is building these high quality UI components. That's where we know how to do things best. We don't care what platform you use, what framework you use. We are happy to surface it up however it is that you want. And if it is, AI that you want, that's where we'll meet you.
Incredible. I'll leave the stage with Kathryn. Kathryn, anything you're excited about beyond UI components, or any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners about Kendo UI, design systems, design thinking, etc., before we wrap?
From a React perspective, be excited is not quite the right word. I'm very curious to see where we go with server components, because I feel like we got off to a little bit of a bumpy start, full disclosure. And not just as a community and adoption wise. And there was a little bit of the kind of back and forth with Next.js that you talked about. I would be, now that that's out of experimental mode technically and in, our current version of React, and we're going to see more widespread adoption across a variety of different frameworks, I think that's going to open things up a lot. And it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. It does seem to be the way the wind is blowing. We're seeing the same thing happen on the Angular side. So I'm curious and interested in watching how we continue to implement that, and if we stick with some of the same patterns that we have now, and if we see broader adoption, or like you mentioned, a lot of folks are like, I think I just want to do client-side stuff. I think I just want to use Vite. That's been my personal side. It's like I'm a strong Vite believer and user, but I want to sit back and watch. I want to make a tub of popcorn and see where this goes. So that's the thing I'm watching in terms of future React. I'm sorry, what was the second half of your question? Oh gosh, I got distracted.
No, that's fine. That was the question.
Okay.
What are we watching? What are we excited about? Excellent. Well, hey, on that note, listen, Sam, Kathryn, and even Kiril, if you're listening on the podcast later, we covered quite a lot of ground today, between what Progress even is, the largest software company that we've never heard of, but also just the dedication that goes into creating high quality design and developer coordinated efforts by way of Kendo UI, Kendo React, Kendo Angular, Kendo jQuery. And it's not lost on me the amount of care, effort, and strength that it takes to create something like this. So I just wanted to, on behalf of myself and the listeners, thank you both, you three, for coming on the podcast and really making it more than just a, hey, use this thing, but taking the time to appreciate the technical excellence and detail that goes into something like this. Thank you so much.
It was genuinely a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
And thank you for all that you do. We are just here all trying to be productive and doing our thing, choosing the right tools. We genuinely care about your experience. So give it a try, and let's see what the future holds with design and UI.
Looking forward to it. Thank you for joining my discussion with Sam Basu, Kathryn Grayson Nanz, and Kiril. This has been such an incredible discussion. I mean, I hope you appreciate with me the depths they're willing to go to build what developers need and then support that by going to the bleeding edge with you. It's truly just very moving to see commitment like that to developer productivity, and kudos to the Progress team. You can find out more about Progress at progress.com. They have a product section where you can explore Kendo UI and Kendo React. I indeed encourage you to try out Kendo React for free and share feedback with the team. Open a ticket, as they mentioned in the episode. If you'd like to follow them individually as well, there's links to their profiles in the show notes. That's Sam Basu, Kathryn, and Kiril. Their profiles are in their show notes, as well as the great book from Kathryn. All these resources are for you because this podcast is for you. This podcast is literally a labor of love for you. Thank you to the sponsors that make this possible. If you're interested in sponsoring, honestly, I wouldn't hold you back. Reach out on X or email. All of the details are at tej.as. Finally, thank you for joining this episode. Thank you for being a part of the podcast. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering.